So many people who've been watching my YouTube videos for a while may be wondering to themselves why I haven't been back to Belarus in the last 5 years. And so what I thought I would do in today's video is explain some of the reasons why I haven't been to Belarus for 5 years as an Australian citizen, and why it's unlikely that I'm going to be returning to Belarus in the near future. When I first went to Belarus in 2017, I had a wonderful time. I was able to stay there for 5 days without a visa because I think Lukashenko, the president of Belarus at that time and continues to be the president of Belarus to this very day, he had kind of opened up Belarus to the West as a way of annoying Russia, showing that he's getting a little bit closer to the West, which very much upset Russia at the time, and still would, I guess. And so it made it very easy for me, who had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks in Lithuania at the time, to simply catch a flight from Vilnius airport in Lithuania across the border into Minsk airport. And I was immediately struck by the cleanliness of Belarus. It was a very clean country. There wasn't the same social problems that I was even seeing in Lithuania. There were less, I wouldn't say there were less drunks on the streets, but it did feel quite safe being in Belarus. It wasn't how I felt when I was going over there, where I was a little bit apprehensive about going to Belarus. It was actually quite a calming experience, my 5 days in Belarus. People were very lovely. It's almost like an old school charm to them, and things were done efficiently and nicely, and people were very kind. The food was not as good as in Lithuania, but that's to be expected, given I was, let's face it, in Belarus. I had many wonderful interactions with the locals. They were very friendly. They were a little bit paranoid sometimes, but not really. And even though I got a bit drunk on my last night in Minsk because it was Victory Day, and I missed my flight from Minsk to Prague, and I ended up with my blurred, drunken vision in the airport, realizing that I was about to overstay my visa and I needed to quickly get myself out of Belarus. And it was actually quite hard because at the airport people didn't speak English when I tried to explain my situation to them. And it was very hard to find any flights that were flying from Belarus at the time to the European Union. A lot of the flights were going to Kazakhstan. A lot of the flights were going to, well, places that weren't in Western Europe, even though I was in Europe, but it was hard to fly across the border into the EU at the time, at least in the next few hours at that point. Eventually I found an English-speaking Belarusian girl, or Belarusian girl, let's call her, and she was very nice, and she got me a $40 American flight back to Vilnius, and so that was a wonderful trip, and I decided to go back to Belarus 2 years later, because I felt like I hadn't seen enough of the country, and Lukashenko had annoyed Russia so much that he had actually opened Belarus up for 30 days. It was a visa-free program for 30 days, so you could be in Belarus for 30 days now. So I flew to Estonia and I flew to Minsk, and I did another trip around Belarus, but only for 2 weeks this time. I probably should have done an entire month. I went to Nezvizh, the castle there in Belarus. I stayed in Minsk for a few days in a very lovely Airbnb that was a little bit of a love pad. No, what's the word? A bachelor pad, not a love pad. I went to the city of Vitebsk in Belarus, which is getting a bit closer to the Russian border. It was a very uncomfortable train there, and once I got there, it was a beautiful town where some interesting incidents would happen. Like there was a woman cursing me from a balcony every day in the main square. I don't know why. There was an old man who kept calling me a debuchka on the street. I don't know why. Debuchka means little girl, I think, and I was singing, I think, when I was walking down the street. I was trying to be happy in Belarus, which is, a big mistake. I remember when I was in my Airbnb in Vitebsk and I was looking for coffee. I was craving a coffee because I'm a coffee addict. And I found a coffee percolator and I found a packet next to it, and I thought, great, this is going to be some lovely Belarusian coffee. But it was actually a packet of condoms, which just added to the whole. It was almost like everyone thought I was on a sex holiday or something, and I wasn't. I had to do this big walk to the center of Vitebsk to go to this one cafe that was kind of arty. Actually, that was a lovely cafe. Sometimes when you would go to the main street in Vitebsk, militia, they were like spinning around like they were teenage hoons. Is that something that happens in Belarus? I swear that's what was happening. They were just like careless police drivers doing, what do we call them? Burnouts and skids or whatever it is. That's what they were doing. I was like, what's going on in this city? It was a beautiful city, Vitebsk. It's the place where Marc Chagall grew up, I believe. Marc Chagall, the wonderful painter. At any rate, I spent a few days there, went back to Minsk, and I just fell into the rhythm of hanging around in Minsk, but I started getting a bit depressed. I don't know what it was. I didn't know why I was in Belarus. I remember I had a magical time the first time. I think it was more something going on in my own mind. It wasn't the fault of Belarus. It was my fault for not embracing the fact that I was in Belarus. So I started just staying in hotels, living in my own head, reading books, getting drunk by myself. Maybe that's the Belarusian experience, I don't know. But eventually I flew back to Helsinki just so I could get a flight back to Australia. And Belarus couldn't have been the most cheerful place really, because Helsinki, Finland's got a reputation for not being the most smiley, sort of talkative country, right? But once I was in Helsinki, it came across as the most friendly country I'd ever been to in comparison to Belarus, which is weird because Belarusians are friendly. It's just sometimes if I went to like a restaurant and I asked if I could get a seat, they looked at me in suspicion or annoyance. Although some of them, especially if they were like arty hipster English speaking Belarusians, they were chilled and friendly. And it was actually my last days in Belarus I spent with a friend from Belarus, and that made everything a lot better. So I guess I would recommend having a Belarusian friend if you go there. That makes everything so much better. I guess that's like many countries. You know, you would think since all of the conflicts that are going on in the world, everything going on with Russia and Ukraine and the West, and the sanctions and the political turmoil. I mean, even Australia, the Smart Traveller website says do not travel. It's code red. Belarus is not safe. But it actually doesn't ban you from going to Belarus, and it said if you want to ignore our advice, you can still get a 30-day visa waiver. I could actually, if I had the money, I could go to Belarus, and maybe like it would put me on a bit of a watch list here in Australia. I don't know. Maybe this video's already put me on that. But I would love to go back to Belarus. I mean, I didn't have a great time in 2019, but I blame myself for that. I reckon I could have had an amazing time if I just put in the effort, and maybe if I learned some of the language a bit too. I think I was trying to learn Russian at the time, but it just didn't go well. I barely remember anything. Anyway, I reckon I could have had, if I stayed in Minsk and properly made friends and put a bit more effort in, it could have been good. It could have been very good indeed. So I've been the loneliest man. Let me know your thoughts. Are you thinking of going to Belarus? Are you from Belarus? Would you like me not to come? Are you Belarusian and you're sick of me going to Belarus? Let me know in the comments, and see you next time.